Hello, in this video we'll show you how to deploy APIs onto Gloo Platform Portal. The instructions can be found on my GitHub repository, and I'll put a link to the repository in the description of this video. What you'll need for this video is a Kubernetes cluster, kind Minikube, EKS, OpenShift, can be anything, and a Gloo Platform Portal installation. And there's another video that I created that shows you how to create that Gloo Platform installation using Helm. I will put the link to that video in the description as well. You will also need to have kubectl installed on your machine, meshctl, and optionally the JQ command line tool. So let's first check our environment and see if everything is set up correctly. So we use meshctl check and we see that the environment is healthy. The Gloo Platform Portal server is installed and running. And we can check the Gloo mesh namespace to see if all the pods, the required pods, are up and running and the services are available. So let's check the developer portal deployment. And indeed, we can see that the deployment, the portal is available and the state is accepted. So next we can deploy a microservice to our Kubernetes cluster. So let's first show that we have no API docs in our cluster, no API docs and resources in our cluster yet. So we create the tracks namespace in which we're going to deploy our microservice. And next we're going to create this Kubernetes deployment and the service, and please be aware of the annotations here. What that does is it instructs the Gloo platform to fetch the OpenAPI spec from the Swagger JSON location and automatically generate an API doc from it. So we deploy the deployment and the service, and when we now check the API docs, and this can take a couple of seconds, we can see that the API doc of the tracks REST API has been created. So this has been automatically fetched using those annotations. We can now take a look at the actual API doc content, so the content of the CR. We can see the OpenAPI specification there defined as an inline string. Next, we check the virtual gateway to see if we are properly hosting the correct host names. And we see that the allowed route tables are there for developer.example.com, which our portal server runs, and api.example.com, through which we're going to expose our APIs. So here we will deploy the route table for api.example.com. And we see that the route table delegates to the tracks API route table. So before we continue, we need to check the developer portal configuration quickly. And there's a configuration item missing here. We need to instruct the developer portal which APIs it needs to publish. And we do that by label selectors. So in this case, all the route tables that have the label portal, dev portal, will be selected and will be exposed through the developer portal. When we now deploy the API product route table for the tracks API, we can see that it has the label dev portal and the label tracks, API tracks, which is used to select the route table for delegation from the api.example.com route table. So we deploy the API product, and because the API product is defined as a route table, the route table contains additional metadata about the API product, including the product ID, the version, the title, as well as the microservices that the API product is comprised of, which in our case is the tracks service that we deployed earlier. And when we now check the API docs again, we can see that an additional API doc has been created. And this is for the API product route table, which is a stitched API, OpenAPI specification from our tracks microservice. And we can see here that the inline string contains the OpenAPI specification for our API product. We can also see that now that we have got an API deployed on the portal, that a portal config has been created for our portal. And when we check the portal configuration, we can see information of the APIs that are being exposed through the portal. So in this case, that is our catastronauts or tracks API product. And this information is fetched from the portal metadata in the API product route table that we deployed earlier. We can check the meshctl, so the Gloo Platform dashboard. And when we open the dashboard, we can see that the portal server is there. So we can see the developer portal there. We can see the APIs that are deployed on the developer portal. And when we check the APIs, we can drill down into the API themselves and look, for example, at the open API specification that is exposed by the API. Next, we can check the RESTful API of the developer portal. So we can ask and retrieve all the APIs that are deployed on the developer portal. So let's use JQ to format that nicely. And we can see that our Catchnuts API product has been deployed on this developer portal, as we've seen earlier. We can also fetch the open API specification through the developer portal REST API. As you can see here, we can nicely format that with JQ again. So this is the open API specification of the API product route table. And we can now also interact with the RESTful service through the api.example.com hostname. So this was a quick example on how to deploy APIs, microservices, and API products to the developer portal. And I hope to see you in one of our next videos.